1944. American military planners faced a strategic problem. How do you defeat an island nation? 6,000 miles from your nearest major base when conventional bombing isn't reaching the targets that matter? Japan's war economy was producing aircraft, ships, and weapons despite 2 years of fighting. American submarines were sinking their merchant fleet, but factories on the home islands kept running. Strategic bombing from China was limited and ineffective. Something had to change. The answer was the B-29 Superfortress, the most advanced bomber ever built. Pressurized cabin for high-altitude flight. Range of 3,250 miles. Bomb load of 20,000 pounds. Remote-controlled gun turrets. It cost more to develop than the Manhattan Project. But having the aircraft was just the beginning. The real question was, how do you use it? What targets matter? What altitude? What tactics? These decisions would shape the final year of the Pacific War and raise questions about strategic bombing that we still debate today. This is the story of the B-29 strategic bombing campaign, the military strategy, the tactical evolution, and the difficult decisions that helped end World War II. Washington, D.C., 1944. The Joint Chiefs of Staff face a strategic dilemma. The Pacific Island hopping campaign is succeeding but costly. Every island, Tarawa, Saipan, Iwo Jima, requires weeks of fighting and thousands of casualties. An invasion of the Japanese home islands would be catastrophic for both sides. Meanwhile, Japan's war economy continues producing weapons. Despite losing most of their merchant fleet to submarines, their home island factories keep running. They're still building aircraft, still manufacturing ammunition, still capable of prolonging the war. The strategic question, can air power, properly applied, cripple Japan's ability to continue fighting without a costly invasion? General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding the Army Air Forces, believed it could. In his official report written in 1945, he stated, "Strategic bombing against Japan's industrial capacity offered the possibility of ending the war through air power alone. The B-29 gave us the tool. We needed the right strategy." Reference, Arnold. Henry H. Third Report of the Commanding General of the Army Air Forces. Washington, War Department, 1945, page 35. This official report detailed strategic thinking on bombing campaign. But what was the right strategy? That would prove far more complicated than anyone anticipated. The B-29 Superfortress was the most technologically advanced aircraft of World War. Its development cost $3 billion, more than the Manhattan Project's $2 billion. Reference, Werrell. Kenneth P. Blankets of Fire, U.S. Bombers over Japan during World War II. Smithsonian Institution Press, 1996, page 51. Comprehensive analysis of B-29 program costs and development. The specifications were revolutionary. Range, 3,350 miles combat radius. Enough to reach Japan from the Mariana Islands. Altitude, service ceiling of 33,600 feet above most. Japanese fighters' speed, 350 miles maximum, faster than many fighters. Armament, 12 defensive 50 caliber machine guns in remote turrets, plus 120mm tail cannon bomb load, 20,000 pounds maximum crew, 11 men in pressurized compartments. The pressurization was critical. Unlike earlier bombers where crews wore oxygen masks and suffered in freezing temperatures at high altitude, the B-29's pressurized cabin allowed crews to operate in relative comfort at 30,000 feet. General Curtis LeMay, who would later command the bombing campaign, described the B-29's capabilities in his memoir. He wrote, "The B-29 was designed for high-altitude precision bombing. The theory was simple. Fly above Japanese anti-aircraft and fighters. Use the Norden bomb site for accuracy. Destroy specific industrial targets with minimal losses." Reference, LeMay, Curtis with McKinley Cantor. Mission with LeMay. Doubleday, 1965. Page 347. LeMay's controversial but detailed account of strategic bombing decisions. But theory and practice would prove very different. The B-29 had serious problems. Engine overheating. The Wright R-3350 engines had a tendency to catch fire. Early missions saw numerous B-29s lost to engine fires before reaching targets. Mechanical complexity. The advanced systems required constant maintenance. Mission-ready rates were often below 50%. High-altitude challenges. Japan's weather, particularly the jet stream, created navigation problems. Winds at 30,000 feet could exceed 200 mph, throwing off bombing accuracy. Despite these issues, the Army Air Forces committed fully to the B-29 program. The first B-29 combat unit, the XX Bomber Command, began operations from bases in China and India in June 1944. These initial raids targeted industrial facilities in Manchuria and Japan. The results were disappointing. Brigadier General Haywood Hansell, commanding ex-UN Bomber Command in the Marianas, reported in December 1944. High-altitude precision bombing is proving less effective than anticipated. Weather obscures targets. Accuracy is poor. We're not achieving the desired destruction of specific industrial facilities. Reference: Hansell. Haywood S. Strategic Air War Against Japan. Army Air Forces Historical Office, 1946. Page 23. Official post-war analysis of bombing strategy evolution. The strategic bombing campaign was not working as planned. Something would have to change. The initial B-29 strategy followed established doctrine. High-altitude precision bombing of specific industrial targets. The theory was sound. Intelligence identified critical nodes in Japan's war economy. Aircraft engine factories, petroleum refineries, steel production facilities, ball-bearing plants, chemical works. Target these facilities with precision. The thinking went, and Japan's ability to wage war collapses. The practice was far more difficult. From November 1944 to March 1945, WW2 Bomber Command conducted dozens of high-altitude missions against Japanese industrial targets. The results were consistently poor. Mission-after-action reports revealed the problems. Weather. Cloud cover obscured targets on 70% of missions. Crews bombed by radar, which was far less accurate than visual bombing. Jet stream. At 30,000 feet, winds of 150-200 mph threw off bombing calculations. The Norden bomb site couldn't compensate for such extreme conditions. Japanese defenses. While B-29s flew above most fighters, Japanese anti-aircraft fire was effective at high altitude. Losses were acceptable but mounting. Colonel Thomas Power, operations officer for ex-US Bomber Command, later testified, "We were dispatching hundreds of sorties, dropping thousands of tons of bombs, and achieving minimal destruction of targeted facilities. Post-strike photography showed most bombs were missing their aim points by hundreds of yards." Reference: Power testimony in United States Strategic Bombing Survey. The effects of strategic bombing on Japanese war economy. 1946. Page 89. Official assessment of bombing. Effectiveness. The most significant rate of this period targeted the Musashino aircraft engine plant near Tokyo. This facility produced 30% of Japan's aircraft engines, a critical target. Between November 1944 and February 1945, B-29s attacked Musashino 9 times. They dropped over 3,000 tons of bombs. Post-war analysis revealed the plant's production was reduced by only 10%. Reference: United States Strategic Bombing Survey. Final report covering air raid protection and Allied subjects in Japan. 1947. Page 45. The strategic problem was clear. Precision bombing wasn't achieving sufficient results to justify the cost in aircraft, crews, and time. By January 1945, General Arnold in Washington was losing patience. In a directive to LeMay, who had just taken command of WW2 Bomber Command, Arnold wrote, "Results from B-29 operations remain disappointing. I want aggressive leadership that will get results." Reference quoted in Coffee. Thomas M. Iron Eagle, The Turbulent Life of General Curtis LeMay. Crown Publishers. 1986, page 158. LeMay understood the message. The strategy needed to change, and LeMay was willing to make controversial decisions to achieve results. March 1945, General Curtis LeMay made a decision that would fundamentally change the B-29 campaign. He ordered a complete tactical reversal. Abandon high-altitude operations, 30,000 feet. 5,000, 7,000 feet. Remove most defensive guns to increase bomb load switch from high explosive to incendiary. Weapons conduct night operations instead of daytime attack, urban industrial areas instead of specific factories. This was revolutionary and controversial. It abandoned the doctrine of precision bombing that had guided strategic air power theory for years. LeMay's reasoning was strategic and tactical. Tactical. Japanese air defenses were designed for high-altitude daylight raids. Night fighters were limited. Anti-aircraft guns were less effective in darkness. At low altitude, accuracy improved dramatically, and weather was less of a factor. Strategic. Intelligence analysis revealed that Japanese war production was highly dispersed. Small workshops throughout urban areas produced components for weapons. Precision strikes on individual factories missed these distributed manufacturing networks. LeMay later explained his reasoning. Japanese industry wasn't concentrated in large American-style factories. It was spread through residential and commercial areas, small shops, home workshops, distributed production. To affect their war economy, we needed to target these urban industrial zones. Reference, LeMay, Mission with LeMay. Page 381. The decision to use incendiary weapons was based on intelligence about Japanese construction. Most structures were wood and paper, highly flammable. Incendiary attacks would be more effective than high-explosive bombs against this architecture. The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, in its detailed post-war analysis, noted, the decision to shift to low-altitude incendiary attacks represented a fundamental change in bombing doctrine. It acknowledged that precision attacks on individual facilities were not achieving strategic objectives. Reference, United States Strategic Bombing Survey. Summary Report, Pacific War. Washington, GPO, 1946. Page 16. The first test of the new tactics came on the night of March 9 to 10, 1945, targeting Tokyo's industrial districts. 4 B-29s participated. They carried incendiary weapons. M69 clusters that dispersed smaller bombs over wide areas. The attack was planned to create a firestorm in the targeted zone. The operation achieved its military objective of destroying industrial capacity in the targeted area, but at enormous human cost. Post-war estimates suggest approximately 100,000 civilians died in the conflagration. Reference, Werrell, Blankets of Fire, page 168. Citing multiple Japanese and American sources for casualty estimates. This raises the most difficult question of the strategic bombing campaign. Were such operations justified militarily? Were they legal under the laws of war as they existed in 1945? Did they shorten the war? General Arnold defended the operations in his official report. Strategic bombing aimed to cripple Japan's ability to wage war. The dispersed nature of Japanese industry required area attacks on industrial zones to achieve strategic effect. Reference, Arnold. Third report, page 38. Critics, including some military officers, questioned whether the human cost was justified. Brigadier General Bonner Fellers wrote in a confidential memo, the deliberate targeting of civilian areas, regardless of military rationale, raises serious moral and legal questions. Reference quoted in Sherry. Michael S. The Rise of American Air Power, The Creation of Armageddon. Yale University Press, 1987, page 284. LeMay himself acknowledged the ethical complexity in his memoir. I was never comfortable with the decision, but I was ordered to destroy Japan's capacity to wage war. Given the tools and intelligence available, this was the most effective method. I believed it would ultimately save lives by ending the war sooner. Reference LeMay. Mission with LeMay, page 387. The strategic bombing campaign would continue in this pattern through the summer of 1945, targeting dozens of Japanese cities with similar operations. From March through August 1945, the B-29 campaign systematically targeted Japanese urban industrial areas. The strategic question is, did it work? Did it significantly degrade Japan's ability to wage war? The United States Strategic Bombing Survey, which conducted extensive analysis after the war, provides detailed data. Aircraft production, 944-28-180. Aircraft produced January-August 1945, 11,066 aircraft. Produced, 40% decline. Production dropped particularly sharply after March 1945, reference USSBS. The effects of strategic bombing on Japanese war economy. Page 73. Table 15, critical war materials, aluminum production. Down 50% by July 1945 aircraft engine production. Down 75% by August 1945 petroleum refining. Reduced by 83% electronics component manufacturing. Nearly ceased, reference USSBS. The effects of strategic bombing on Japanese war economy. Pages 76-81. But correlation doesn't prove causation. Multiple factors contributed to Japan's economic collapse. Submarine warfare. By 1945, American submarines had sunk most of Japan's merchant fleet, cutting off raw materials from Southeast Asia naval blockade. The Japanese home islands were effectively isolated by July 1945 resource depletion. Years of war had exhausted stockpiles of critical materials, strategic bombing, destroyed production facilities, and disrupted remaining manufacturing. The USSBS concluded, it is not possible to attribute Japan's economic collapse to any single factor. Strategic bombing, submarine warfare, and blockade worked in combination. However, strategic bombing significantly accelerated the process, particularly in the war's final months. Reference USSBS. Summary Report, Pacific War, page 24. Importantly, the survey also found that Japanese civilian morale, while damaged, remained largely intact. The bombing did not cause a collapse in public will to continue fighting, a key assumption of pre-war strategic bombing theory. Reference, USSBS. The effects of strategic bombing on Japanese morale. Page 95. What strategic bombing did achieve was economic disruption. By August 1945, Japan's war economy was in collapse. Aircraft production for July-August was projected at less than 2,000 planes. Many factories had evacuated to dispersed locations. Greatly reducing efficiency transportation networks were severely damaged. Worker absenteeism reached 40–50% in remaining factories. General Torashiro Kawabe, Deputy Chief of the Japanese Army General Staff, testified after the war. By August 1945, our ability to produce war material had been severely reduced. Continued operations on the scale necessary were becoming impossible. Reference, USSBS interrogation transcripts, quoted in Japan's struggle to end the war. USSBS 1946, page 13. However, it's critical to note that Japan still had substantial military forces intact in August 1945, over 2 million troops on the home islands, approximately 10,000 aircraft, many reserved for kamikaze operations, extensive coastal defenses. The Japanese military was still capable of fierce resistance to an invasion, even if their economy was collapsing. Reference, Allen Thomas B. and Polmar Norman. Codename Downfall. Simon & Schuster. Zini 95, page 226. Detailed analysis of Japanese military strength in August 1945. In Lahore, strategic assessment becomes even more complex when considering what happened next. The atomic bombs and Soviet entry into the war. August 6 and 9, 1945. Atomic bombs destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. August 8, the Soviet Union declared war and invaded Manchuria. August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. What role did strategic bombing play in ending the war? This question has been debated by historians for decades. The answer is complex. The USSBS, in its summary report, made this assessment. Based on detailed investigation of all the facts, and supported by testimony of surviving Japanese leaders, it is the survey's opinion that certainly prior to December 31, 1945, and in all probability prior to November 1, 1945, Japan would have surrendered even if the atomic bombs had not been dropped, even if Russia had not entered the war, and even if no invasion had been planned or contemplated. Reference, USSBS Summary Report, Pacific War, page 26. This remains one of the most cited and disputed conclusions in Pacific War historiography. This conclusion suggests strategic bombing, both conventional and atomic, created conditions where Japanese leadership believed continuation was futile. However, many historians dispute this assessment. Robert Pape, in his comprehensive analysis, argues, strategic bombing contributed to Japanese economic collapse, but was not the decisive factor. The Soviet entry into the war, eliminating hope for a negotiated peace, was more significant in compelling surrender. Reference: Pape, Robert A. Bombing to Win Air Power and Coercion in War. Cornell University Press, 1996, pages 127 to 128. Japanese leadership testimony is contradictory. Some officials emphasized economic collapse from bombing. Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yonai said, "The strategic bombing made continuation of the war absolutely impossible from an economic standpoint." Others focused on the atomic bombs. Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo stated, "The atomic bombs provided the pretext needed to overcome military opposition to surrender." Still others cited the Soviet entry. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki testified, "The Soviet attack dealt a final blow to hopes of achieving acceptable peace terms." Reference: multiple testimonies compiled in USSBS. Japan's struggle to end the war. Pages 13 to 27. The likely truth: multiple factors combined to compel surrender, with strategic bombing being one significant element. The B-29 strategic bombing campaign against Japan remains one of the most debated military operations of World War II. From a purely military strategic perspective, the campaign achieved its objectives, severely degraded Japanese war production capacity, disrupted transportation networks, contributed to economic collapse that made continuation of the war unsustainable, demonstrated air power's capability to affect enemy war-making ability. The B-29 proved that strategic air power could have decisive effects on an industrial enemy's capacity to wage war. But the campaign also raises profound ethical and legal questions that extend beyond this documentary's scope. Were attacks on urban industrial areas justified under the laws of war? Did the strategic benefit outweigh the enormous human cost? Were there alternative strategies that could have achieved similar results with less destruction? What precedents did these operations set for future conflicts? These questions remain subjects of legitimate historical debate and deserve serious consideration. What is historical fact? The B-29 campaign was one factor among several, including submarine warfare, naval blockade, atomic weapons, and Soviet entry, that brought World War II to an end in August 1945. The B-29 itself became the foundation for post-war American strategic air power. Its design influenced the B-50 and B-52. The concept of long-range strategic bombing remained central to American military doctrine throughout the Cold War. We must remember this history with clear eyes, acknowledging both the strategic realities that leaders faced and the terrible human cost that resulted from their decisions. Understanding this complexity is essential to understanding war itself. Over 500,000 Japanese civilians died in the strategic bombing campaign. Over 3,000 American airmen were killed in B-29 operations. These losses deserve to be remembered as part of the larger tragedy of World War II, which cost over 60 million lives worldwide. Today, B-29s are preserved in museums as historical artifacts, reminders of both American technological achievement and the devastating power of modern warfare. This has been the story of the B-29 strategic bombing campaign, told as military history, with full acknowledgement that behind every strategic decision were human lives, on all sides, forever changed by war.